A well-dressed woman strides confidently through an upscale department store, her arms laden with designer bags. Hours earlier, she strangled an elderly woman to death. The credit card she's using to fuel her shopping spree belongs to the victim. This isn't just a story about murder. It's a chilling tale of how one woman's materialistic obsession and thrill-seeking behavior culminated in a series of brutal killings. Welcome to GBRLIFE Transmissions. I'm your host, Caitlin, and you're listening to GBRLIFE of Crimes, where we explore not just what happened in crimes committed by women, but why it happened and the psychology behind them. Today, we're examining a case that challenges our understanding of female serial killers. A story that combines deadly violence with compulsive shopping in a way that stunned investigators. Who was behind these calculated crimes? Dana Sue Gray. The year is 1994, and in the quiet retirement communities of Southern California, Canyon Lake area, elderly women are being targeted by someone they never would have suspected. A former nurse who turned her caretaking skills into tools for murder. But before we dive deep into those fatal months in Canyon Lake, we need to understand where Dana Sue Gray came from. Born Dana Sue Ambrust on December 6th, 1957, her early years were marked by significant trauma. At just 8 years old, she discovered her mother's body after her mother unalived herself. This profound loss was quickly followed by another major change. Within months, her father remarried, bringing a new stepmother into the household. The transition was abrupt and difficult. According to Dana's later accounts and family members' testimonies, her stepmother Angela had a very different idea about child rearing than her mother. Where Dana's mother had been nurturing and emotionally expressive, Angela believed in strict discipline and emotional restraint. She was particularly focused on appearances and social status, often criticizing Dana's clothes, behavior, and friends. If they didn't meet her standards, she just didn't accept Dana. And remember, this would have happened all of a sudden for Dana. One day, she had a mother and father that she had known her whole life. They're her parents, and a life that she had been comfortable and happy in. To all of a sudden, one day, her mom is gone. And she's the one who found the body. And her father is remarrying and then remarried months later. And then to somebody who was the polar opposite, being just 8 years old. This is devastating. And it's also very confusing. For many of us parents, this is one of our greatest fears. Our children suffering because we weren't there to protect them until they're ready to go out on their own. And this happened to Dana as a child. And her new family dynamic created what psychologists call complicated grief, where a child isn't allowed to properly process their loss before being forced to adapt to new circumstances. Dana found herself navigating not just the trauma of her mother's death, but also trying to win the approval of a stepmother who seemed more interested in maintaining social appearances than providing emotional support. Friends who knew the family during this period recalled how Dana would try to gain her stepmother's approval through achievements and perfect behavior. But these efforts were often met with criticism rather than praise. And this pattern of seeking validation through external accomplishments and material presentations would later manifest in troubling ways in her adult life. And on a personal note, shame on this woman, her stepmother. Despite the trauma of her mother's unaliving and difficult relationship with her stepmother, Dana initially appeared to channel her energy into positive directions. She pursued a career in nursing, a choice that seemed to offer both stability and purpose. Colleagues from her early nursing days described her as competent and caring, though some noted that she could be unusually focused on appearances and material possessions. Gee, I wonder why. In her 20s, Dana married and seemed to be living the California dream. She worked as a licensed practical nurse at various hospitals in the Riverside County area, bought a house, cultivated an image of success, but beneath this carefully maintained facade, cracks were beginning to show because she was just 8 years old, but now she's an adult, trying to continue to prove herself to the world. So she has a shopping addiction, and her shopping addiction, which had started as a seemingly harmless way to cope with stress began to spiral out of control. Friends noticed she would spend entire paychecks on designer clothes and luxury items. She would often arrive at work wearing expensive new outfits, tags still attached, only to return all of these clothes days later to fund more shopping. This pattern of buying and returning became increasingly compulsive, what psychologists call shopping bulimia, a cycle of binge shopping followed by purging through returns. She gave marriage a try as well, but her first marriage crumbled under the weight of her spending habits and mounting debt. The divorce seemed to trigger an even more intense phase of her shopping addiction, because this is how she handles everything. She began opening multiple credit cards, maxing them out, and lying to friends about her financial situation. By the early 1990s, she was in severe financial stress, with creditors calling constantly, and her nursing salary nowhere near enough to cover her mounting debts. Dana's behavior at work began to change as well. While she maintained her professional competence, colleagues noticed increasing mood swings. She would alternate between periods of obvious financial stress and inexplicable shopping sprees. Some coworkers recalled her making odd comments about elderly patients and their financial situation, or showing unusual interest in their personal lives. In 1993, her life took another downward turn. She lost her position at a prestigious hospital due to budget cuts and had to take less desirable nursing assignments. Around this same time, she was going through her second divorce. The combination of job instability, another failed marriage, and crushing debt created what psychologists call a pressure cooker. Friends who knew Dana during this period describe a woman increasingly disconnected from reality. She would talk about elaborate plans to solve her financial problems, ranging from unlikely business ventures to fantasies about wealthy men, sweeping her off her feet and rescuing her. Her shopping became more frantic, as if she were trying to maintain her self-image, even as her life was unraveling. By early 1994, Dana was living beyond desperate. Her credit cards were maxed out. She was behind on her mortgage, and her nursing work became more sporadic. It was during this time she began spending more time in Canyon Lake, a retirement community where she had occasionally worked as a home health nurse. She was familiar with the area and its elderly residents, many of whom lived alone with comfortable savings and multiple credit cards. The transition from nurse to killer didn't happen overnight, but when it did, the violence was shocking. In February 1994, Dana crossed a line that would forever change her life and end others. Her first victim, 86-year-old Norma Davis. She lived alone in Canyon Lake. The attack was brutal. Davis was suppressed with a telephone cord after Gray had talked her way into the woman's house. But what happened next sets this case apart from typical homicides. Within hours of the murder, Dana was using Davis's credit cards at an upscale department store. Just weeks later, she attacked 57-year-old June Roberts in her home. The violence was escalating. Roberts was beaten with a wine bottle and wounded multiple times. Again, Dana took her victim's credit cards and immediately went shopping. This pattern of murder, followed by shopping sprees, suggested what psychologists call hedonistic thrill killing, combined with compulsive spending behavior. Her third victim was 87-year-old Dorinda Hawkins, who survived. Dana had approached her at an antique store, and then she harmed her until she was unconscious, and she stole her credit cards. Hawkins' survival would later prove crucial in identifying her attacker, and her final victim was 80-year-old Dora Beebe. Like Davis, she was suppressed with a telephone cord in her home. The similar method showed a pattern that helped investigators connect the crimes. What makes Dana's case particularly fascinating from a psychological perspective is her combination of motivations. Most serial killers are categorized as Black Widows who kill for financial gain, or angels of death who kill those in their care. Gray's case combined elements of both, along with the unusual addition of compulsive shopping as part of her post-murder ritual. The investigation gained momentum when surveillance captured images of Gray using her victims' credit cards. Her shopping sprees were methodical and extensive. She would spend thousands of dollars in single outings, buying designer clothes, jewelry, and home goods. This behavior points to what forensic psychologists call sensation-seeking behavior. The thrill of both the killing and the spending created a powerful psychological reward style and cycle. Investigators were struck by Gray's composure during her shopping sprees. Security footage showed her calmly browsing stores and making purchases just hours after committing murder. This kind of emotional disconnection is called affective flattening, an ability to compartmentalize and continue normal activities despite despite having committed horrific acts. The break in the case came when Dorinda Hawkins, the surviving victim, provided a detailed description of her attacker. Combined with the surveillance footage and the credit card records, investigators were able to identify Dana Sue Gray as their suspect. She was arrested in March of 1994, wearing some clothes that she had purchased with her victim's credit cards. The trial revealed the extent of Gray's calculated approach to murder. She would carefully select elderly victims who lived alone, and she used her nursing background to gain their trust and then attack with brutal efficiency. But it was her post-murder shopping that captivated public attention. Prosecutors described how she would drive directly from crime scenes to shopping malls, using her victims' credit cards before their bodies were even discovered. Gray's defense team attempted to portray her as mentally ill, highlighting her traumatic childhood and compulsive shopping disorder. However, the prosecution successfully argued that her actions showed clear premeditation and awareness of right and wrong. The evidence was damning. Not only did she target vulnerable victims, but she also took steps to cover her tracks and establish alibis. She was no longer 8 years old. She was an adult now. And like prosecutors mentioned and proved, she knew right and wrong. So let's examine the key elements of Dana Sue Gray's psychological profile. First, we have her early trauma patterns: maternal self-annihilation discovery, emotional neglect, and disrupted attachment. Then we see her compulsive behaviors: shopping addiction, thrill-seeking, and need for control. Finally, we notice her criminal psychology: methodical victim selection, lack of empathy, and post-murder rituals. Forensic psychologists identify several distinct features in Gray's case. Her combination of practical nursing experience with violent crime behavior shows what's called occupational exploitation, using professional knowledge to facilitate crimes. The shopping sprees that followed each murder suggests both thrill-seeking behavior and an attempt to fill an emotional void through material acquisition. To avoid the death penalty, Gray accepted a plea deal in 1998. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murders of Norma Davis and Dorinda Beebe, and the attempted murder of Dorinda Hawkins. The charges for June Roberts' murder were dropped as part of the plea agreement. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the intersection of trauma, materialism, and violence. It raises important questions about how early childhood trauma can manifest into adult behavior, and how the pursuit of material goods can become fatally intertwined with criminal actions. This has been GBR Life of Crimes, part of GBR Life Transmissions. I'm Caitlin, reminding you that understanding the darkness helps us appreciate the light. Join us next time as we explore another case that challenges our understanding of the criminal mind.